Good. Welcome back. Welcome to our last talk of the conference, today with Peter Gfader. Peter works as a software architect, consultant, and trainer for Beyond Agility, where he helps people, teams, and organizations to build and deliver exciting products. The drive for improvement and the smell of coffee gets him out of the bed in the morning. So Peter is on his journey to make everyone happy, and with his vision, happy employees make happy customers. And by the way, if he isn't riding a mountain bike or playing the trumpet, you might find him at the local user group, hanging out with other nerds. And without further ado, I'm happy to have you here, Peter, and everyone enjoy the talk. Handing over to you.
Thank you, Jonas. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone. I cannot see you, but I will try to make this as interactive as possible with asking questions, with doing polls, and with something a bit more crazy. And the thing that is a bit more crazy is we are going to use a Miro board altogether. So I just popped in the chat a Miro board. This is a little tool that you might be familiar with since a couple of years. Yeah, some of you I can see already. And I'm going to start to share my screen now. And then we'll get going. Chrome tab. Here we go. All right. Acceptance testing sounds easy, but it's hard to get right. Now, I want to do a little warm-up questionnaire with you. Now, in the Miro board, please go to the true/false section that you can see here, and you can see all the mouse pointers, which I'm going to disable in a moment when I don't have the feeling for it. Now read through the tests, through the questions. Our test suite gives us feedback within 10 minutes if everything is good. Is this a yes or a no? Yes or no? Can you put a dot on that question? Second question. Take your time. You need to click on the dot and then move it in the board. Some people have figured it out. Very cool. Go ahead, go ahead. And I will turn up the mouse pointers because we have more than 60 people in the board and that's a bit noisy. Second question is, new developers joining the team are quickly on board. Is this very true because they can get on the code and the test and all the tools very easily? Or is it hard? And then it would be false. Third question, here we go in the direction of acceptance testing already. Our tests are meaningful. Would you say yes? Would you say, yeah, we are not quite there yet? Fourth question, our tests are understandable by non-software people. Now, this is what acceptance testing really has as a goal, I think. And let's see where you put your dots here. Our tests are understandable by non-software people. Cool. I can see a couple of yeses here. Very cool. Slowly, I can also see more people coming on the Miro board. Very nice. I see now 74 people. Very nice. Go crazy on this board. Put your dot where you think it is. Our tests document the behavior of our system. Would you say yes to that? Or would you say, they are way too technical? Pretty much the last question, the almost last question is about our documentation is out of date. Would you say yes to that or no? And then we go to the last question. The business people will collaborate closer with us when we are doing ATD, BDD, or this practice called acceptance testing, which is an umbrella term for that we are going to talk about in a second. Would you say yes, no, I don't know, somewhere in the middle? Cool. I see quite a couple of yeses here. That's cool. That gives me the feeling, hey, we have already a deep understanding of what's going on what acceptance tests might bring to us to the plate and what the benefits of acceptance testing really are. Now, let's dive into that thing a little bit deeper. So I'm going to open up the first frame, and in the first frame, I'm showing you a couple of things, but I don't want to really focus on those. So the first one is about the social part. Do you live in a project manager sandwich. So the project manager tells you exactly what to do, or a requirements engineer, or a business analyst. So someone else figures out what the problem is and tells you then how to write your Java code or your Python scripts in order to solve that problem. This is a social problem as well. We are not going to talk too much about those. We are not diving into the free amigos a lot. And we are not talking about this psychological problem, lazy fact. You were too lazy to read that number. I see you. Now, this is a human behavior thing. So nobody reads the documentation. And last bit, we are also not talking about this problem. Now, in the waterfall days or in the plan-driven days or in the good old days, we had the plan that we do some development and then we do some testing at the end. PJ had this mentioned a couple of times and I really enjoyed his session. Thank you very much, PJ, for your talk. What's the problem with this approach? There's a huge problem because usually the testing just takes a little bit longer. Sorry, the development takes a little bit longer. The development takes a little bit longer, and then suddenly we don't have time to test it properly. No, we can't test it enough. And what does that really mean? Testing it enough? When are we ever done with testing? Interesting question. So let's dive into the topic. Now, I have here a little word of warning, and the warning is this one here. I am not going to distinguish between testing and checking. Now, if you're familiar with the work from James Bach or Michael Bolton, these guys are from the context testing community. They are very keen on making a distinction between testing and checking. I'm actually on purpose ignoring that today because I'm just talking about testing. And I actually just published a poll where I want to see your reactions to, do you know what checking means? What the difference is between testing and checking? Have you ever heard of James Bach? Have you ever heard of Michael Bolton? Let me know in the poll. And in the meantime, I would go ahead. Yes, I see some yes. Never heard of this as well. No. Yes is quite strong still. Cool. People are voting. Go ahead. Go crazy on this voting because I will take a look later on this voting here. Just a word of warning, I'm not making the distinction between testing and checking. I'm just talking about testing in a general sense here. All right. Oh my God. Thank you for that reaction. All right. Do you know how to get people mad or how to drive developers crazy? You go in a room and ask them, what is a unit test? Or another approach is, so what is the difference between a full stack test and an end-to-end through the UI and interface layer test? Now, you always get nice discussions if you start to ask this question. Now, there is a lot of companies that figured out, hey, these definitions don't make sense anymore. So they started to work on a different definition. Now, I want to show you the Google test types. This is actually a very old definition. It's more than 11 years ago that Google came up with this definition. So Google doesn't talk about unit tests anymore. They talk about small tests, medium tests, and large tests. A small test has this criteria. You could potentially think about the unit test in your language world about that. Now, a large test would be something that is collaborating, integrating multiple systems, Gmail with Bigtable IP, with the network layer and everything. So a test would exercise the whole stack through some sort of an interface. I'm not saying user interface because that's up to the Google guys on how they do that, but that's quite interesting. So Google figured it out 11 years ago. So we did the same. If I'm saying we, I'm talking about Scrum.org. Scrum.org is the company I work with and do some trainings. Not mentioning any training here, but if you want to attend the training with me, I'm very happy to. You can find that on the internet. Now, we have 3 types of testing in our world as well. Now, these three types of testings are development. Now, these are all for the development team, the tests that the developers are doing. They need to get safety on the technical parts. Let's say we want to integrate certain pieces, a contract. We want to validate if a contract is still valid all the time in the future with this version of our API client, things like that. These are all developer tests. Developers really care about those. So these are for the development team. On the other hand, we have exploratory tests. Now, exploratory tests, these are the manual tests that we try to break the system. We try to see how does it behave in certain conditions. Now, relating to James Bach and Michael Bolton, this is actually what Michael Bolton and James Bach talk about testing, to be honest. So when they talk about testing, they mean exploratory testing where you need to use your brain, or the rest is really checking. But that was just a little side note. So why do we have exploratory testing? Because you can't automate every test. And you have to do some tests for, especially when you're testing complex systems, as you may know as well. Now, I love this picture because this picture shows how deodorants are tested. Now, do you want to be a tester in that environment? Why not? But now let's focus on the third type of test. Now, the third type of test is acceptance tests. Now, these are the ones that I care a lot about and I want to talk about in this session. I think those are the most valuable ones because they are about collaboration between the development teams and the stakeholders on the outside world, without saying product owner, without saying user, without saying subject matter experts or the other people that we have in an organization. Because here is the power. Here is the power because these are, did we understand you right? What is the goal? What does the user want to achieve? So this is really what the acceptance tests are about. Now we have this definition of these three types of tests. So the quick definition is really asserts that the system does what the user wants. Pretty simple. That's an acceptance test. Now let's have a look on these acceptance tests. Now acceptance tests, one thing that they have in common is they always work with examples. Now they are very concrete and very human driven, and they always have an example. There are two examples that I copied from the internet. Given I have a certain article and the basket contains something, when I trade, when I search, then something happens. You can see here the arrange, act, assert pattern. You can see here the given, when, then pattern, which is pretty much the same pattern. And this is very readable. Everyone can understand it. And we can have a conversation. We can have a conversation with the business people, with the subject matter experts. We can even show them this code piece because they could potentially read that. Very cool. There's another version here. This is more the Gherkin style of doing things. I'm pretty sure that every one of you have heard Gherkin because this is a test conference. So I don't want to introduce the concept of Gherkin at all to you. But these are really the key pieces of acceptance testing. We use examples. All right. Now, Peter, I heard about BDD. I heard about ATDD. What's going on? What should we do? What's all those things about? Now, this is a little collection of information that I collected. Let's see what you think of this definition. Now, behavior-driven development and acceptance test-driven development, both are outside in. We always start with the outside world, the problem, the humans, the people, the users. We talk first. There's a lot of talking instead of quickly diving into a tool, into an IDE, or into another topic. It's about collaboration. We need to collaborate over different teams or conditions. It's very much example driven. We always have examples and we talk about those examples. They're executable specifications because basically we specify with an example how the system should behave, and they give a lot of clarity where we should start with the implementation. Now, this is what those two tools or these two practices have in common. Now, there's a little bit more. Now, let me see what the time is. It's 2:45. Let's not dive too deep into this topic here of the BDD and ATDD. I just give you a quick recap. and you can get the slides afterwards as well from me. I will send you a link where you can download them. Now, BDD is really something that came out from Dan North and his friend, which I don't recall at the moment. And they thought about, instead of saying test, they thought about talking about behavior and calling them specifications. And then they thought about, hey, we could actually write from a business view of point of view our code and our tests, and then they drive the system behavior from that point of view. This is how I think about behavior-driven development. And on the other hand, we have acceptance test-driven development, which is a bit more, I would say, Scrum-friendly, because in Scrum, a lot of teams are using some sort of a user story or a hypothesis or another tool to have on their backlog. And usually what they have then, they have some sort of an acceptance criteria. And for every acceptance criteria that you have, they are starting then to automate those acceptance criteria. So basically, you have an acceptance criteria, or maybe typically you have a lot of acceptance criteria, and then you automate along that acceptance criteria. Now, how does that look like? Now, this comes from the book Growing Object-Oriented Software by Ned Price and Steve Freeman. Shout out to these two guys in the UK. So you start with writing a failing acceptance test. Now, this is a high-level test. Given I'm looking at a page, when I do this, then I expect this to happen. This is an acceptance test. And then if you have a failing acceptance test, then you go into the unit level, you go into the development phase, the red-green refactor mode, the TDD cycle, the developer test bit. This looks similar if you work with user stories. So you have a user story, then you have acceptance criteria. And then for each acceptance criteria, you create a failing acceptance test and make the test pass. And again, this is the same cycle, just visualized differently. Maybe it helps you to understand this topic a little bit, how this could look like. All right. Now, what are good tests? Let's expand here the topic a little bit. What are good tests? Here is a little summer essay that an 8-year-old has written. And he wrote, I went swimming, I ate a pink ice cream, my grandma died, I played with my cat on the balcony. What do you like about or dislike about this summer essay? Like, dislike. Yeah, Mike Bolton. I don't remember what the singer is singing, but there is another Michael Bolton, yeah. What do you think about this summer essay? I went swimming, I ate a pink ice cream, my grandma died, I put my cat on the balcony for 2 hours. This is, I wait another second for responses on the chat. Nothing yet. Dislike. Okay, cool. Thank you, Paulina. All right. Why dislike? I guess, and this is the intention of why we are actually talking about this example, we have a lot of detail here, and we have something, ooh, maybe this is quite important, that someone died, and I played with my cat on the balcony for 2 hours. Is this really important as well, if your grandmother died? So here we have different abstraction levels. We have different levels of details. We have a mixing concept of things. And this is a good example if you want to teach other people as well about testing and about how good tests should be structured like. All right. Now, what could be then good acceptance tests? Now here I have a couple of acceptance tests. Now go ahead and mark those things that you like and mark those things that you don't like. Bring everyone to me. What do you like in those tests? What do you dislike? I'm looking at now at the good acceptance tests. I'm showing the mouse cursors again. Wow, there's a lot of noise going on. That's good. So I see that I'm not alone here in my office. At least it doesn't feel like I'm being alone. And I see a lot of people coming in. Now, number two, obviously, yeah, this is no good at all. I mean, way too much details. There's way too much noise about the how. And especially here, we are probably asking why. So every time you ask a lot of whys in this test, there's something off, definitely. Let's have a look on the third one. This is an interesting one because this is actually one I have written some years ago, and you are not hurting my baby. No, you can't hurt my baby. Actually, I learned. I mean, this is something I wrote some years ago, and in here to ask the question, what are we testing in this case here? And you know what? Actually here, we are testing this calculation. And you see here the problem, we actually need a lot of stuff just to test all this. So just to test this calculation, we need a fake Northwind database context. We need an order. We need an item fake. We need some stubs and fake and mocks and all that craziness just to test a calculation. That must be wrong. That can't be right, does it? Let's have a look on some green ones. Here we go with number 6. Let's see where you are. Cool. Now here, this is an authorization system that I also have written. Yeah. But here is the question of what he did, not what grandma did during the summer vacation. Yeah. Point. Oh, actually, excellent point. Thank you for that. My grandma died is not something I did. Good point. Thank you for that. Nice observation. Cool that I see people really thinking with me. I love that. Thank you. Let's have a quick look on this test. This is about an authorization library that we have written some time ago. And I can see some things here and I'm happy. I can see here some white space. A little bit too much, really, because actually these are maybe 2 tests here. Here is actually the first assert, should be, and here is the second assert. This is probably not right, but in the end, here we have an arrange step, here we have an act step, and I can pretty much understand roughly what's going on when I have some knowledge in that domain, which I guess don't have. So this test is actually meh. Could be improved, not too bad. Let's see the number 5. Number 5. Here, I also see some good things immediately. This is also a test that I've written some year ago. I see some green ticks. I love that. Here we have some setup code and we are doing some things, but where is really the act? And I know actually here is the first A is here, the second A is here, and here is the assert. Not very visible, but the good thing about this test here is I can really talk to the business people about this one. So this is actually something we did. We actually printed those tests out, and I will show you a nicer example of the printout of those tests. We actually printed out those tests. We went to the business people and we asked them, what should happen in this situation? Let's assume we have this thing happening in our system. Is Anna winning the thing with $100? Or is it still going to the previous person, which is Bob? Now, these are interesting conversations. You can have this one over this test, which is a good thing, I think. Let's have a look on this one. There are a couple of red ticks again. Okay, yes, I see your point. You dislike, there is a little bit of detail here. There's a wait and what's going on. A JSON serializer, we need that. We have some white space here. Now here is some setup code in the constructor of that test. What I love about this test though is the naming. The naming is quite nice. Returns 3 doctors. So when I see the test output of this test, I can immediately understand, okay, the doctors list in this scenario should return 3 doctors. Doctors list should return 3 doctors. That's quite nice to see in a test output in the runner. So the test name is quite nice, I think. On the other hand, there is again a lot of noise. And why do we need to set up all this noise? Just to test some logic where we only return 3 doctors. I don't know. Would be nice to know. In this case, I don't know because I've not written those tests. Let's have a look on the last one. Here we see a lot of green ticks again and some red ones. Now, this is written with a framework called machine specifications. And the goal of that framework was to incorporate BDD style in the C# language. And here, the nice thing is, again, when we run, I get some nice visual indicator when which step the test is failing and things like that. So the test naming is nice on the output, but maybe not so nice regarding from a readability point of view, which is something I dislike here again. Here we actually have 2 tests because here is a context. So this is the first A. Here is the act. And then we have the assert, which there are actually 2, 1 and 2. It should have be in this situation and this situation. Making these 2 tests or splitting them or whatever you want to do might be an option to improve this one and things like that. And again, this is very framework stuff. So you can't really see what's going on because there's too much noise here, I think, in this machine specification. I see some comments. Tests should be more flexible. I agree, definitely, because I want to change them and see what the change might bring. So what I love to do when I review some tests as well is I change some logic in the test and see how the system behaves and if it's still green or whatnot. So this is a manual mutation testing I do in my code reviews. And then we have another comment from Dennis. Maybe I'm a bit old school, but why would you go to your business with an auto test source code? Because you're going to validate assumptions. And I will show you in a second on how that could look like. Okay, let's make up an acceptance test list. So thanks to Dave Farley with input for that, I took his good acceptance test list and I expanded it with my input here. So the first check is really about, we call this the Paolo test. Paolo is a subject matter expert at my current client. And if Paolo, he's not a technician, he's not a coder. If Paolo can understand the test, then it's probably a good acceptance test because he reads the test and can understand, what's going on. Cool. So write the test, the acceptance test for Paolo. Second one, which is related to the first step, is obviously we want to have it in the domain of in the language of the business domain and the business users and domain experts. So we don't want to have technology in there, obviously. Third point, we should focus on the what. The what is the behavior of the system. How should it react when we poke it in that certain way, and not on the how. It should be a solution independent formulated because that allows the people to find great solutions for the problems we are framing in our tests. What I really love in the code reviews, and which is very simple to review, is are the 3 steps visible, given when then, precondition, action, postcondition, or the 3 A's, act, arrange, assert, arrange, act, assert, sorry, I got it wrong. And the last point is really, does the name of the test really tell me what's going on? Do I know which scenario we're talking about? What does this example make special? Why should I read this test? Now, these are things that I really care about when I look at acceptance tests. Some more comments. It's more than you go with this source code to your team or to futures yourself, I suppose. Yes, exactly. It's not the requirements purpose to validate the assumption. I need to think about that comment. And while I'm thinking, I'm trying to talk. I'm not able to do that, so I will think about that later. I think you will have the answer in a second here. So here is the test that we have seen before. Here we can see that we have an auction system. This is something I've written some time ago. Here we have the setup, the first arrange, then we have the act, and then we have our expectation. Now, when you have a test like this, what I really love doing is I can talk about what if scenarios. I can make a copy of this test and ask the business people, what if I do the same, but this time the user doesn't enter a limit bid? What happens if the auction state is running for 5 seconds? What if the initial bidder is not Bob, but someone else? Now, this is very, very powerful because you can talk about what if scenarios. And this is one powerful feature of on what acceptance testing allows you to do. The second big feature is it's a common understanding on how it works, on how it should work. And if the tests are green, the system works like that at the moment. And this is, again, in my experience, very, very powerful, because then you don't need to look at documentation or other things, because if the tests are green, you can release to the user, you can deploy to production, everything is good. Now, the third one is about the comment from Dennis, I think. So Dennis, let me show you what I did, what we did. This is about the common language. So here, what we did in this case, we created from these tests that were written in C# at that time, we created HTML output. So there was a step in our build system that created HTML output. We printed out that HTML output, and then we went to the business people, to the subject matter expert, to the market operators, and we asked them, "Hey, is this how the system is supposed to work?" I'm actually here. And this is very powerful because, again, you can confirm, hey, this is really how the business should work. Now, we obviously sometimes we made here an assumption, and a very wrong assumption. So we said it's -100, and then we saw, hey, how do people react? Do they spot this problem? Then we can have a conversation. -100 is not a valid number at all. Let's fix it. Let's improve it, and things like that. Now, this is very powerful. The common language, again, I found it quite interesting. Here is a German example of Gherkin, but I found it quite interesting. If you're practicing Gherkin with your subject matter experts for a long time, they will talk to you in that language. So they come to you instead of, hey, Peter, we need a new feature on that form. I would really love to see a fly up that comes in, and then I could select something, and then it sends me an alert. So instead of something vague, they will tell you, given I'm on that form, when I click that button, or when I execute that function, or when I want to be alerted, then I get an alert. So this is very powerful because suddenly people talk to you in this given when then language. And then you have already a test that you can write, and from there you get started. And the last one, this is all about the testing. Why we actually testing? It's a very beneficial safety net, safety harness. This is why we are testing. We have automated tests. And in my experience, these acceptance tests are actually quite easy to automate. I mean, easy to automate is probably the wrong answer, but they are automatable, let's say. But where should we automate those things? And here is the thing. Here is a question to you again. We are looking at the next exercise. Please come to Miro for a second. Now, I would love that you highlight in this system that I have over here where you would put the acceptance tests. Now, what you should do is grab a pen in the Miro tool that you can find on the left-hand side and try to say where would you put the acceptance tests. While you think about where the tool is and how the tool works, I give you one answer for free. Now, exploratory tests should always go through the whole system because you're executing and testing the whole thing. So the blue is exploratory, and these tests obviously go through the whole thing. Red, on the other hand, like the developer tests, the safety harness for the developers, that is probably somewhere around here. We are testing our entities, or we testing our service facade and with the connection of commands. Are the commands dispatched to the right command? Things like that. So this could be developer tests. Now, where should we poke the system regarding acceptance tests? Let's see what you think. On the top. Okay, I see a lot of people saying on the top. Okay, cool. Because you enter the system through the UI in this case, through the client, the web client, and external system. Okay. This is probably the answer that Dave Farley wants you to hear, because Dave Farley is very much going in the direction of talking about an acceptance test should always execute a deployed, real running production system. And I have a different opinion, and this might be interesting for you. All right. Yeah, I see a couple of check marks. Yeah, I see a service facade. Interesting. Yeah, very cool. I think I get you to think about these things in the right direction. Now, here is what I would do. From an acceptance test point of view, I would find the smallest piece where I get the most knowledge and the most safety. Now, if we have some logic that is very complicated and is very key to our users, I probably would write an acceptance test just around that logic. And probably that logic is in our entity or in our service. So I would write an acceptance test just around those entities and that service. I completely ignore the database. Hopefully I'm using an onion architecture or hexagonal architecture, or sometimes some people call it a ports and adapter architecture. And in that case, I can really focus on the domain logic and on the calculation of orders and the calculation of some sorts of things and the calculation of who wins the bid and things like that. So the goal here is really to think about where can our test be as specific as possible to get the most value for the whole team. Now, Dave Farley has another opinion. Now, let's have a quick look on that opinion. Now, Dave Farley says he's going to run the acceptance test against a deployed release candidate. And for me, that's not important. I mean, that's a good thing to have. Obviously, if you can do that, that's a very good thing. But I would rather focus on the collaboration parts about the users. Where can we collaborate with users? It's about the collaboration and where the value is of what we're doing. And I would focus on that one. And the technical boundary where we actually poke the system is just an implementation detail. So that depends on how you implement this acceptance tests, depending where you're actually poking the system. But I would really much focus on the collaboration, bringing the domain language into code. And in my experience, I run a lot of clean code and refactoring trainings. In my experience, a lot of problems rise when we have some sort of language in the code and some sort of language in the domain where people are talking to each other. And if these worlds don't marry up, you need to do some sort of mapping. And that is a bit of quite dangerous. Thank you for the heart. Cool. I see the value of tests running against the production-like system, but I value the collaboration between people much, much more, because that's about clarification. What do we really mean? And things like that. All right. We have another 20 minutes. Now, I would like to talk about the what now, and especially the what now for you. Can you complete this sentence? Complete this sentence. After this session, I will so that. Because here are some things to think about. Who writes executable specification? What benefits would you expect by doing this? What changes when you call your tests behaviors? What hinders you to write acceptance tests? What are advantages or disadvantages of having a test infrastructure? And you might figure out that you need a lot of test infrastructure to make acceptance tests work. And regarding the summer essay, where are your tests? Are they like summer essays? And I wait some seconds for you. In the Pine chat. I will so that. Is this working? I will collect our screenshots from TestCon so that other regions are placed. Yes, very cool. Thanks, Paulina. Awesome. I will have a beer so that I can dance on the dance floor. Very nice. All right. Since we have another 20 minutes, I will go quickly through some experience points from my point of view. Now, the first experience point is, how do you deal with acceptance tests that are not implemented or green for a long time? Now, there are a couple of options here. You could actually put it on a feature branch, which I would not recommend. I would not do this. Let me highlight that because this is quite important. Not a good option, but you could potentially do this. You could have a special failure mode. So as long as the acceptance test is reddish, you could have it called assert inconclusive, and then the test turns orange in the .NET world. But orange or red is basically a bad thing. Third thing is something I really want you to embrace. Start with a smaller acceptance test. Maybe there is something smaller in the test, and then you can actually derive from there a developer test. Fourth thing, fake it till you make it. So you can fake a lot of stuff in order to get an acceptance test green. And the fifth option is run an acceptance test in a separate build step. So it's not in your face all the time, because especially if you are working on that feature for a couple of days. The goal is really to slice features into smaller pieces. What do you do when you have multiple whens in one scenario? Now, this can sometimes happen. I don't think this is a too bad thing. I would really strive, though, to have short scenarios with only one step. It's the bad thing about long scenarios is they are typically too big, and long tests are easily failing, so that's a bit dangerous. But the overall goal is really to think in scenarios from an end user perspective. So as a family father, when I'm using the Pine app, I want to quickly see what happens at 3 until 4 because the baby is sleeping then. So I can fit my schedule of my life with the TestCon conference. So this is thinking from the end user perspective, and this is quite powerful. Let's think about acceptance criteria automation. This is something actually I let you as a bonus for later to read later. What do you do when you have scenarios that are very complex in Gherkin, Cucumber, SpecFlow, and they don't make sense anymore? Now, here is an answer you probably don't like to hear. You need to invest in your test infrastructure. Think about proper abstractions. And there's a feature in Gherkin, and I know that a lot of these tools, all these tools are implementing it, called background. So in the background, you set up your test scenarios, and then you can poke the system from those perspectives. Cool. Last question. Gherkin. Let's quickly talk about Gherkin a little bit. Now, I have a strong mantra. This is kind of my religion, my mantra I live for, my vision. And the vision is if something inhibits refactoring, we need to stop doing that. We need to fix it. We need to get rid of it. because refactoring for me is really a practice that is very, very important. And if you have something that is discouraging refactoring, we have a problem. So I would really, 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 really focus on ways to make all your tests refactoring friendly. Now, one thing to do there is if you repeat the given step in all your Gherkins scenarios, so it's easy to see what is given. That's one thing. The other thing is spend time in your test infrastructure. Spend time to figure those things out, and really invest time and money in your test infrastructure and in your tests. Now I'm going to skip over mocking because this is a bonus that you will get when you send me an email after this session. And I will quickly go through what is counterintuitive on all this. Coders want to write code. But in my experience, engineers think broader. Engineers think about short feedback loops. We think about what's the expected outcome. What does the user do differently afterwards? How can we make the life of the user better? These are the things that engineers think about. And when they think about these things, acceptance testing really helps them to make it clear what they want to achieve. So, what is really the goal? And we get the safety harness and we get free fast feedback and a lot of good things. So, if you have coders that don't want to write tests, maybe you have here a couple of bits to talk to them and get them on the boat. All right. Now, my last bit here is the selling, how to sell acceptance testing to your managers. And let's quickly go through those 4 points. First thing, now you can put requirements in the source control. How cool is that? How can you say no to that? Now here we talk about productivity. This is your productivity booster. We have visual feedback. Are we done? If all the acceptance tests are green, we are done. The sprint goal is achieved. This is very powerful. Third point, how do you sell acceptance testing? Acceptance testing promotes teamwork because we need to collaborate across the organization. Engineers with testers, with business people, with QA people, with automators, with monitoring, release management people, and so on, because we all need to understand what the system needs to do. And in the end, how can you say no if we are building what the customer wants? That is an amazing thing to do. Cool. So, great things to sell acceptance testing to your management. Let's have a quick look on some I will so that. I will register on Miro.com. Very cool. I will run acceptance. I will run acceptance testing tests so that I check the product fulfills its purpose. Cool, Christian, very cool. I will test that the clients would be happy. Yes. I will drink some coffee so that it could work a bit. Yeah, good comment. I will try my best so the customers are happy. Very nice. Happy customers, happy company, money in the bank. Very important. I will review our testing setup so that lessons learned here can implement it. Very cool. Thank you, Caroline. I will send you the slides. After this session, I will review tests and implement new knowledge. Cool. Get this Miro board, get the PDF, have a look with your developers around those tests. What do your developers think about those tests? Maybe it gives you some idea on what went well, what didn't go so well. So here are the references. You will get those as well if you send me an email in a second. I will show you that link. So thank you very much for attending this session. Now we are going to start the Q&A section. And before we do that, I will post the link that you need to click in order to get the material. I see Jonas popping up, so that's a good thing. He wants to kick me out and close down the whole conference.
No, we have a few more minutes left, and
cool.
We have some questions coming in.
Awesome.
So the first one is when you give acceptance tests to Paolo for review. So when are you going to do it? I guess it's a timing question. So like at what situation?
Now, I would ask it differently. I would try to incorporate Paolo into the whole process. So instead of we are doing something and then I hand it over to Paolo and let him review the stuff, I would rather try to make it like so that Paolo comes to us as soon as he hears there is a new feature, a new idea, a new requirement, a new hypothesis that he wants to implement. He comes to us and then we collaborate over those things. So instead of sending documents around or Confluence pages or feature files in your GitHub repository, I really would love to see that the people sit together. There are a lot of tools also in the remote world that work very well. Miro, user story mapping, where you can dive into all these details. But I would rather, instead of handing over stuff and now you need to review that stuff, let's collaborate. So more that thinking of let's collaborate.
Awesome. Yes. All right. So we have another question from Enrico. He asks, can I use Gherkin to write acceptance testing for backend services? Are there better tools or approaches?
Very good question. Now, I have mixed experience with Gherkin. I have some experience with Gherkin working very well, where the business people, they wanted to collaborate, they embraced the language. They also wanted to write Gherkin themselves. So definitely thumbs up. That was a good experience. On the other hand, I also had experience in another project we did for an insurance company where we made the effort to implement the tooling around Gherkin, to write the specifications in Gherkin. And then the business people were not interested in that at all. So they just said, hey, we show you the Excel file, and in the Excel we have our specification, and then you can do whatever you want. If you want to do this given when then stuff, or you want to write just code, that's up to you. Now, in that scenario, I would skip the whole given when then stuff and immediately start with writing tests in Java, because then you don't have this another layer on top of the Java code. Because you have, I'm setting up my thing, I'm poking my thing, and then I'm asserting something. And the given when then is more a noise on top of that. You don't need to have special tooling around that. The build gets a bit faster, easier, and things like that. So to answer your question, Enrico, if I would like to write acceptance tests for backend services, I probably would not use Gherkin. But because the power of Gherkin is really if you want to collaborate with people that are not coders, so with people that don't understand code. If you have this nice given when then syntax that is very readable, no C#, Java, Python, or Ruby script noise, no semicolons, no curly braces, because that makes non-coders very distracted, let's say. So I would skip Gherkin and try to incorporate some of the ideas that I've shown you in just plain Java, C#, Kotlin tests.
Great. All right. Thanks. So it seems that we have no more questions right now. We can wait for a few more seconds. Otherwise, thank you so much for your talk. Really enjoyed it with the last keynote. And also, yeah, do you want to add something?
Yes. How did the whole Miro thing work? The questions with back and forth, was this okay experience?
So for me, it was great. So it worked like the jumping around, and I actually did not know that you can like get all the people like move together with you through the slides on Miro. I think was quite good.
Cool.
All right. So if there's no more questions, I will just quickly look in the chat.
I have a lot of questions to you.
Questions to us.
Dear attendant, who writes the tests in your organization? Maybe we see some answers in the chat. And the second question would be, what hinders to write acceptance tests?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's see. All right, we have also feedback on Miro.
Cool.
So Miro was cool, but the delay made it a bit hard. I can understand that. I'm not sure how long the delay is, so
me neither.
That's a problem.
There's another question in the Q&A.
Yeah, just popped up.
Let's finish with that.
Sure. Incorporating Gherkin or other business language into test harness seems like a lot of work on creating libraries that will encapsulate complexity into keywords. Do you have any advice how to conquer that problem?
The short answer would be don't do it. The long answer would be it really depends from the context of the business domain that you're in and if the collaboration happens between you and the business people. So if you're going in the direction of Gherkin with given when then, or if you're writing your tests in an abstraction language like given when then, or I'm arranging something or set up something, that is very beneficial in my experience because it enables you to think about what if scenarios, and it enables developers to think more from a end user perspective. But if the language is more in the way, then I would rather think about other ways on how to do acceptance testing. I'm not sure actually if I understood the question right, but if Gherkin is in the way, I would skip that abstraction level. That's basically the quick answer.
Right, so we have more answers in the chat. So it seems
Cool.
like QA are the mostly there for writing tests.
Was that a question?
No. There's like the answer to your question is who writes the executable specifications.
Cool.
It seems like QA is
cool.
All right.
The team I've seen.
Team.
I love the answer team, obviously. But in general, in my experience, that's a good thing. If you have a small team of great engineers, you can achieve a lot and make a lot of people happy. Not just your employees, but also end users. And the whole company wants to work in that manner. So acceptance testing spreads over the whole organization, which is a great thing. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. I guess we will... Oh, there's another question. What about acceptance criteria in automation? Maybe the last question for today.
What about acceptance criteria automation? I'm not sure if I understand the question. What about, is it like, how would you automate all that? Or is it about...
I guess it's about like, how can you like do your tests, the acceptance criteria, how can you write them so they match your automation, right? So you can automate based on that. I'm not, but I guess that's what it means. I'm not sure.
When I think about it from a different angle, acceptance test-driven development is exactly doing this. Now, if you're doing acceptance test-driven development, ATDD, you're trying to automate the acceptance criteria. This is the whole goal.
Yeah.
You talk to the product owner, how do we know that this is done? And then he will make an example. And this example is actually something you take in the code base and you automate. So what about acceptance criteria automation? Yes, that is what the practice of ATDD is all about.
Okay, so she just wrote in chat, hidden slide in Miro. Please check Q&A. Is there a hidden slide?
There is, yeah.
This is what's...
This is the bonus.
All right. Okay, so we have 1 minute left, so I will do the closing right now. So thank you again for joining and great talk. I guess you can all write him some questions via email or like contact him if there are more questions. And overall, these were the talks of the second conference day. So I hope you all had an amazing day full of inspiration and meaningful lessons. I had. Once again, I want to say special thanks to our sponsors, Accenture, Metasite, Pact, and Wix Engineering. A huge thank you to our organizers and also track moderators who worked really hard to make this conference happen. And of course, thank you so much to all of our speakers. Besides, as we have already mentioned, 15 most active participants of TestCon Europe 2021 conference will be awarded with Pact ebooks of their choice. The organization will review the statistics and will contact these activists in person after the conference. And now, last thing for me, we invite everyone to visit the virtual booth of our sponsors, Accenture. They will hold an open discussion on performance engineering. And at last, I wish everyone a nice day. I hope you really enjoyed the conference, and I hope to see you all next year. And that's it from me. Thank you all. And we're off.